Attention, passengers. This is your co-pilot speaking. Your pilot is black-minded, so you are not going blind and there is no power failure. You are merely experiencing the immense blackness of his proximity, and when you hear his voice, you and the cabin will get even darker than you are currently. We will be cruising at the speed equal to light because the one other thing that travels equally fast is darkness. Your loved ones awaiting your arrival may not recognize you at first sight. This is normal. Simply tell them about the pilot and they will understand. We will taxi to the runway now, so please buckle up and prepare for a high-speed departure. Thank you for choosing Jet Black Airways, where the phrase Jet Black is also a verb. We hope you keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Let me start off by giving a shout out and a big thank you to S Jacques for coming through on the CashApp. From the bottom of my black heart, from the depths of my black mind, and to Adine for coming through. S Jacques also, as I've stated, keeps me updated. He sends me news updates. And I'm going to discuss some of these updates from the continent. In Chad, the presidential palace in N'Djamena got attacked. I don't know exactly who the 19 are that got killed, but the attack on the palace was not successful. They didn't manage to go in and take over the presidential palace. There have been foreign coups more than once. Just in the last year. Also, Ibrahim Traore showed up in Ghana unexpectedly. He's the president of Burkina Faso. He said that he would not be attending personally the inauguration of the Ghanaian president-elect into the office of president. But he actually showed up. He responded to the invitation by requesting that they expect his representative to show up. When the Burkina Faso's plane landed, he stepped out himself, no representative. He had a security as any head of state would. That's to be expected. That is normal. But he stepped out on his own without the representative. He wore his pistol along with his military uniform, as he normally does. What he did was he sent a message to everybody that he is not taking chances. He's going to do his job, but he is not going to just show you how much he trusts you to try to win you over. He's saying trust is not going to be for everybody. I'm willing to help, but I'm not playing with security. He's learning from what happened with others before that made decisions on behalf of Africa, whether collectively or specific to a nation within, and how they got targeted for this pretty much every time. So let's look at why he did this. Let's say that he sat up and he said to the Ghanaian government when he was invited to the inauguration, expect me there. And then he shows up. Well, because he said, expect me there, now he's expected. He does not know necessarily who every puppet is, who every plant is, who every infiltrator is, but he does understand that it is not very complicated for European foreign powers, Western European foreign powers, to find sympathizers that will act on their behalf for some chump change. That he does know. So when he shows up in Ghana, he shows up unexpectedly, still with his sidearm. The security detail he had is normal. A head of state has that even when they travel to other countries. But again, he has a level of security that is unconventional in that, one, he keeps a sidearm with him, and that number two, he shows up after saying that his representative will be there, not him. What he's pretty much saying to everybody is, I don't mind being polite and diplomatic, but I'm not going to be an easy target. And I'm going to have to be unpredictable so that I don't become an easy target to enemies. And the thing is that when he showed up and his name was announced, the crowd got loud in the stadium. It's like he stole the show. That's what it was like. And that means something. That tells us something. They did not expect him to show up. The Ghanaians that were spectators in the crowd did not expect him to show up. But by the same token, when he showed up, they took it as a pleasant surprise. They were like, yes, this is even better than we expected. This means they're with Ibrahim Traore. So even if the government is not, the people are. Within Ghana, not Burkina Faso. What this tells me there is something that a lot of us don't think about. Some of us who get really off into the diaspora wars fail to realize that when people disagree with African Americans, I don't mean disparage us and lie and say things like we have no culture. That's BS. But if they just disagree with something in it, and they can understand that we may disagree with something in theirs too. Oftentimes, their cooperation is not really just because they're ganging up on us. See, we think that people in Africa don't care about each other. Now, it's easy to find a plant and an infiltrator. That is true, but we tend to think that people in Africa don't care about each other in general, and that is not true. The people in Ghana read about what goes on in Burkina Faso, and they celebrate Burkina Faso telling France to fit the guck out, and then the other nations joining and saying, yeah, you know what, you can leave here too. You got the Sahel Alliance, and then Senegal and Chad. That's 5 states right there that are former colonies of France, telling France, fit the guck out. Take your troops with you. Eventually, what happens when they start coming with their own currency? What happens when they say, you know what, screw that currency. How about our own? We'll print it on African soil. How about that? Because France's standard of living at some point is going to take a dip. And they know it. And the rest of Europe is looking and saying, do we let France become a crap hole country, as Trump would call it, right in the middle of Western Europe, or do we bail it out collectively? Which one is it going to be? They're already in the Eurozone. They use the euro, but they print out a currency for their former colonies in Africa to use. Printed in France, the CFA. And there's an agreement that these nations won't use their own currencies. Can you imagine? See, when Puerto Rico uses the US dollar, You understand why? Because it's a territory. It's a territory of the U.S. Wait a minute. Hold up. You can fly to Puerto Rico with no passport. You see the difference? So is Burkina Faso a territory of France still? No, it's not. So what's up with that? Are any of the other nations in the Sahel Alliance or the other Senegal and Chad that have told France to fit the guck out territories of France? Are they overseas territories of France? They're not. France has overseas territories. It does not include these particular nations. So what the work is going on? Why does France get to print up the currency that these nations can use as legal tender? France knows that this has upheld its economy partially, maybe greatly. But these nations are beginning to look at each other. So this shows that while you have a lot of interconnectedness in terms of infrastructure that is missing within Africa, there is still a concern that is not missing. So sometimes we tend to think, well, if Africa's so fractured and they don't like each other, then why is it that they're willing to gang up on us, failing to realize that it's not really them ganging up on us. A lot of times it's just they're not as fractured as we thought, and we're not as fractured as we think. Quiet as it's kept. We think oftentimes as Black people in general that we're more divided than what we are. We're unaware of what we have shared collectively over time. We are diverse. We're not a monolith, not at all, but we are still unaware of what we have shared. We're unaware of how much DNA has been shared between East and West Africa, let alone other things that come along with sharing DNA. The trade networks that have gone on independently of Europeans. We're even unaware of some of the trade that is going on in between parts of Africa and parts of the world outside of it. Did you know that bananas came into the African continent by way of the Zimbabwe civilization trading with ancient Indonesia? Before they were colonized by the Dutch, or any part of Africa was colonized by the British or the French or the Dutch or the Germans or the Italians or the Spaniards or the Portuguese. Did y'all know that? I learned this from an African history teacher. He taught the history of Southern Africa. That's modern day South Africa and its neighbors. He taught that history. He himself is an East African from Ethiopia, and he was teaching this. He might still be doing it. So the ability of Black folks to empathize with each other and to even cooperate with each other is something that even we drastically have underestimated about ourselves. The question is, have other people pointed out our divisions because they really believed in these divisions, or have they been pointing them out, trying to exaggerate them in our eyes so that we would not believe in our cooperation? And that is not something I can answer in this recording. It is a question I know that we need to ask, because the next time someone points it out to you, then you can ask yourself the question and then look at what they're saying and why they might be saying it. And you will know based on that context which one it is, which one applies, which answer applies to the person speaking to you that is not from Africa remotely or recently at all, and telling you about the inability of Black people to cooperate with each other across nationalities and language. And yeah, let's hear it. You'll come back and you'll tell me. But yeah, what I'm coming to understand from all of this is how much Africa learns from itself. how much we do not need other people to come along and help us to communicate with each other or to cooperate with each other. You see, a lot of times, many groups of people, not just our own race, but many groups of people began to have contact with each other because of colonization. And what many of them did not know was that their ancestors had trade before colonization with each other. Some believe that pre-colonization Indian princely states, because all of India was not the same politically, had heavy trade with Abyssinia, what we now today call Ethiopia. Some have even suggested that the vowelization of Ethiopic script, which is what you see when you look at Amharic writing, was actually something that was done after exposure to Sanskrit writing. And someone said, you know what? Even though theirs is a different alphabet, that's true, it is. By the same token, since they do have vowels in theirs, we can add some diacritical marks to our own script for the vowels, because you change the vowels within in Semitic languages in general, change the vowels within the same root words, which are usually 3 or 4 consonants, can change the exact meaning of that root word, like a derivative. Think of it like that. So changing the vowels can decide if the spelling of the verb in a particular sentence means he ate or he was eaten. As an example. So there's some speculation as to that. This precedes any colonization by any Britisher, by any Italian, by any European at all. Now, they did not colonize each other. India did not colonize Abyssinia, nor vice versa. This meant they traded, they cooperated, they exchanged ideas, which is what normally happens. So in a nutshell, the rest of the world did okay, not only independently of each other, but even in the context of trade with each other without European intermission and intervention and intercession. But then post-colonization, a lot of people started to view other colonized people through the lens of the colonizer. This is something that happened across the board within the same race and between different races, but certainly between different races. Seems like Africa is now beginning to return to a pre-colonizer view of the rest of itself. Either that or it's always been that way and we were just lied to. But I would advise us to take note of what's going on the continent. Check out the news headlines every so often. See what's happening. Because it is something upon which we can capitalize, that at the same time that African diasporan men in the Americas, especially the Anglosphere, are beginning to say we will not be dominated again by matriarchy or gynocracy and misandry, which serve white supremacist interest. At the same time that that's happening, you got a Sahel alliance and other Francophone states that are beginning to tell France, you can fit the guck out and get lost. And you got other nations that are even beginning to tell England, look, we can trade this, that, and the other. There's a limit to what we're going to trade, though, and you're not going to tell us if we can trade with somebody else. That ain't up to you to dictate. You don't dictate our relationship with Russia. You don't dictate our relationship with Turkey. You don't dictate our relationship with China, although I do recommend we keep an eye on them. And most importantly, they're beginning to say, you will not dictate our relationship with each other. If you're really pro-Black, that's one of the main things you'll focus on, not whether or not you keep on always pursuing Black women of any nationality that keep getting up and running from you or trying to get you to play stepdad. But more so, it is about, will you tell not only anyone that ain't us, but especially the former colonizer of us, that they don't get to dictate our relationships with each other? How's that for authentic pro-Blackness? Thank you again, S Jacques, for sending me those links. I hope this is helpful to those of you that hear this. As always, Black heart, Black mind, Black out. Assalamu alaikum, and Black heterosexual, non-select male power because they don't like it, and Black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Thank you for flying with us again here on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase Jet Black is also a verb. I invite you to go to the Jet Black Lounge, the link of which is in the description, at Buy Me a Coffee, and subscribe to either the business or the first class and get access to more Jet Black Air content, where the phrase Jet Black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.